Stay until the end. I deserve someone better. Those words hit like a slap. And they didn't come in private. They came from my wife, Carolyn, spoken loudly in front of 40 people at our daughter's college graduation dinner. Stay until the end. My name is Richard Grant. I'm 53, and I've spent the last 2 decades working as a freight coordinator for Oak Ridge Construction in Des Moines. I solve problems. I get shipments where they need to go on time every time. But apparently, stay until the end. That wasn't enough for my wife of 27 years. The table went dead silent. My daughter Emily, the reason we were all gathered, looked stunned. My sister Joanne dropped her fork. And my brother-in-law Frank slowly set his beer on the table. Till the end. As if the sound of glass meeting wood might break the tension, Carolyn kept talking. About finding herself, about how she'd outgrown. Me gesturing toward the bar where her personal trainer, Chad, was waiting like a rescue boat. I wasn't angry. Stay until the end. Not really. I'd been expecting the storm for months. I just didn't think it would hit during my daughter's celebration. So I pulled out the envelope I'd been carrying in my jacket for weeks. Plain white. My handwriting. Her name on the front. Stay until the end, I said. She paused. The entire room did. Then she opened it, and everything changed. Carolyn froze mid-sentence, staring at the envelope like it might explode in her hands. The whole restaurant had gone quiet. Waiters paused. Still until the end. Silverware stopped clinking. Even the background music seemed to fade. What is this? She asked, her voice suddenly small. Open it, I replied calmly. You wanted to share something with everyone tonight. Stay until the end. So let's share. I watched her fingers tremble as she peeled back the flap. Her eyes moved quickly across the first page, then slower, and then they stopped. Her face drained of color, and for the first time that evening, Carolyn was speechless. What is this? She repeated, but this time the question wasn't performative. She knew. She just didn't want to say it out loud. Go ahead, I said. Read it out loud, Carolyn. Stay until the end, since we're being honest with everyone tonight. Her hand tightened around the paper, her mouth opened. But nothing came out. And in that moment, I could see at the exact second the curtain dropped. This wasn't a celebration anymore. It was a reckoning. Let me back up for a minute. Carolyn and I met in college. She studied marketing. I majored in logistics. She was outgoing, spontaneous, big dream energy. I was reliable, steady, stay until the end. The guy never missed a deadline. For years, we were a good match. At least I thought so. We bought a modest house, raised a kind and brilliant daughter. Emily and I built a solid career with Oak Ridge Construction. I worked long hours, stay until the end, sometimes 60, 70 a week, just to make sure our family never lacked anything. Carolyn, meanwhile, floated between part-time roles, nonprofit here, a little real estate there. She called it finding her path. I didn't complain. Stay until the end. I wanted her to feel fulfilled. When Emily was born, Carolyn stayed home. I picked up extra shifts to cover expense. I missed a few recitals, a couple of school conferences. She handled the parenting day to day. I kept the bills paid and the lights on. Stay until the end. We weren't flashy, but we were stable. Or so I thought. That stability began to shake 2 years ago, right after Emily left for college. Carolyn got restless. She joined a gym, started wearing more expensive clothes, getting home later. She talked about vibrations and alignment, words you don't expect to hear from a woman who used to spend Saturday mornings clipping coupons. Then she met Chad, her personal trainer. Tall, tanned, full of compliments. Stay until the end. The kind of man who makes a midlife crisis feel like a vision quest. Suddenly, she had opinions about protein powders and spiritual energy. But the red flags weren't just in the blender smoothies or the new yoga pants. Stay until the end. It was the way she'd pull away when I tried to hug her. The way her phone never left her hand. The weekend she said she was visiting her mom, but came back with a Colorado resort brochure tucked into her purse. I didn't confront her then. Stay to the end. I didn't shout or accuse or beg. Instead, I called Frank, my brother-in-law and also a seasoned attorney, and asked him a few hypothetical questions. We talked about estate planning, trusts, postnuptial agreements. Just in case. Richard, he said. If you think something's happening, doming matters. So I acted. Quietly. Legally. Deliberate. I reviewed the postnup Carolyn had signed 5 years earlier when we refinanced the house. Stay until the end. I began shifting my earnings. Carefully into protected trusts, most of them set up in Emily's name. I made sure the house title, the cabin deed, and even the boat were restructured under the umbrella of those trusts. I wasn't hiding anything. Stay until the end. I was preserving it for the one person in my life who hadn't lied to me. 2 weeks before the graduation, I found the final straw. I came home early and overheard Carolyn on the phone, laughing with Chad like she was back in college again. Stay until the end. When she saw me, she hung up so fast I could practically hear the guilt crackle through the receiver. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened her dresser drawer looking for a charger and instead found a printed email. A reservation for a wellness weekend in Aspen. Two guests. Chad Snake, in date 3 days after our daughter's graduation. That's when I knew this wasn't some emotional fog. This was a plan. Till the end. And it was designed to make me the bad guy, so I made my own plan. I compiled everything: her travel reservations, proof of infidelity, financial statements showing where our assets had gone and where they were now. I wrote a brief, stay until the end, a polite note, and placed all the documents in a simple white envelope. That envelope stayed in my jacket pocket for 2 weeks. I didn't fantasize about the moment I'd deliver it. I just waited for her to make the move. Stay until the end. She chose our daughter's graduation. She chose to embarrass me, but she forgot that I fix things for a living. I solve problems. And that night, the problem I solved was her. Carolyn didn't finish reading the letter. She couldn't. The end. Her hand started to shake the moment her eyes hit the second page. I saw her try to compose herself, straighten her shoulders, square her jaw, but the damage was already done. Everyone at that table had seen it. The smile was gone. Stay until the end. The smug confidence she walked in with had vanished, and in its place sat a woman who just realized the stage she built for her grand performance had been pulled out from under her. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. Stay until the end. You bastard. The words weren't just angry, they were shocked. Betrayed even. The irony was so rich I could have laughed. But I didn't. Every head in the restaurant turned. Forks froze midair. Waitress stopped pouring wine at the next table. Is there a problem here? The manager asked, nervously inching toward our table. Carolyn stood up, waving the papers in the air like some kind of deranged flag. My husband just... She paused. Stay until the end. Realizing what she was about to explain our legal situation in front of 40 friends, coworkers, and family members. People who had known us for decades. People who were now watching her unravel like bad knitting. Please, I said quietly. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene. She snapped. Implied that she knew. Knew what? I asked. That you were going to announce your affair at our daughter's graduation dinner? Stay until the end. That you were going to humiliate me in public and walk out like the heroine of some midlife rom-com. She froze. The room froze with her. The only sound was the soft clink of a water glass somewhere behind me. She couldn't finish the sentence. Stay until the end. Because finishing it would mean admitting it had all been premeditated. Right down to Chad, her personal trainer, sitting awkwardly at the bar pretending to be invisible. You can't just move our money, she hissed. I didn't move our money, I said calmly. I moved mine into protected trusts. According to the postnup you signed 5 years ago, you remember that one? Stay until the end. The one your attorney reviewed clause by clause before you initialed every page. At that moment, my brother-in-law Frank, also the attorney who'd helped me structure the agreement, cleared his throat. Carolyn, he said gently, stay until the end. Say there when you signed it. You had your own counsel. You were not under duress, and the terms are valid under Iowa state law. Infidelity voids any claim to post-marital assets. Carolyn turned red. Her voice grew shrill again. What about alimony? Say until the end I gave up my career for this marriage. My daughter, Emily, bless her heart, finally spoke for the first time. Her voice was clear, but I saw her hands trembling. Dad paid for everything, Mom. The house, my school. Stay until the end, the cars. You haven't worked full-time in 15 years. You didn't give up a career, you just never committed to. The words hit like bricks. Carolyn looked stunned. She turned to Emily, pleading, Sweetheart. Stay until the end, you don't understand. No, Emily said. I understand perfectly. You lied. You planned all this to make Dad look like the villain. But he didn't yell. He didn't throw things. I stated that. He just protected us while you were planning your new life with... even Carolyn's mother, Helen, who flew in from Arizona for the graduation, spoke up. She was 77, barely 5 feet tall. But when she got serious, Carolyn Marie, she said in a tone that stopped everyone cold. You tell me right now what's going on? I didn't mean for it to happen, Carolyn whispered. I felt stuck. I felt invisible. Stay until the end. Paul works all the time, I needed more. So you cheated, Helen said bluntly. You betrayed the man who put a roof over your head and sent your daughter to college without a single missed payment. Chad, by this point, stay until the end, looked like he wanted to evaporate. When Carolyn turned to him, he was already backing away from the table like he'd just realized the building was on fire. I think we should go, he muttered. Oh. No, I said. You can go. Stay until the end, but Carolyn might want to finish reading that third page first. She flipped the final page, and when she read it, her face went ghost wide-eyed. The housey, she murmured. Is in Emily's name now, I said. So is the cabin. And the boat. Stay until the end and the savings accounts. Everything you thought you were walking away with. Protected. Legally. Permanently. You get what you brought into this marriage, which was, if I recall correctly, a Jetta, some student loan debt. Stay until the end, and a decent record collection. The fight was gone from her now. She sat down heavily, still staring at the pages. The plan, the escape, the fresh start with Chad had crumbled right in front of her, and she had no script for what came next. I stood. Stay until the end, helped Emily with her coat, and turned to Carolyn one last time. You got your moment, I said. You told everyone how much better you deserve. Now you get to go find out what better looks like when you're 49, unemployed. Well, stay until the end, and alone. Emily and I walked out of the restaurant. Carolyn called after us, but I didn't turn back. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without a knot in my chest. The morning after the dinner. Stay until the end. I woke up in the guest room at my sister Joanne's house. Sunlight spilling in through the half-closed blinds. There was a strange stillness in the air. Not silence, but peace. The kind that follows a storm when the wind has said all it needs to say. Stay until the end and the sky just rests. I sat up slowly, letting the weight of the past 24 hours settle. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad anymore. What I felt was something much deeper. A kind of relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't pretending. Stay until the end. I wasn't covering for Carolyn's moods or trying to fix what she never wanted to keep. Emily came by mid-morning still in her graduation hoodie, holding 2 coffees and a bag of blueberry muffins. Stay until the end. She didn't say much, just handed me the cup and sat beside me on the porch swing. After a few minutes of quiet sipping, she finally spoke. You did the right thing last night, Dad. I didn't feel like it at the time, I admitted. Didn't want to ruin your day. You didn't ruin anything, she said firmly. Mom made her choices. You just showed everyone the truth. I looked at my daughter, the same little girl I used to walk to school in the rain. Teal, now a full, grown woman, wise beyond her years, and felt a swell of pride. I had spent so much of my life protecting others, protecting Carolyn's ego, protecting Emily from the cracks in our marriage. But somewhere along the way, stay until the end, I'd forgotten to protect myself. That changed now. Over the following weeks, the fallout from the graduation dinner spread quickly. Friends called, unsure of what they'd witnessed, but curious enough to ask. Some were supportive, some awkward. A few said nothing at all, which told me everything I needed to know. Carolyn moved out 2 days later. No apology, no explanation, just a half-hearted email asking if we could keep things civil for Emily's sake. I didn't respond. Stay until the end. Civility is earned, and she'd made her final speech loud and clear. From what I heard through the grapevine, Chad dumped her before she even unpacked her boxes. Apparently, being someone's midlife escape fantasy doesn't pay well when reality sets in. He blocked her number, moved to another gym, and didn't look back. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I met with Frank again this time to finalize the divorce paperwork. Thanks to the postnup and years of careful planning, it was a clean process. Stay until the end. Carolyn contested nothing. She knew she'd lose. The judge read the file, looked at the evidence, and closed the session in under 20 minutes. Emily chose to stay with me for the summer before moving out west for her grad program. Stay until the end. We turned the house back into a home. Fixed the creaky porch swing, cleaned out the garage, even painted the kitchen a warm chestnut color. It felt like hitting reset without having to run away from anything. One night, as we grilled dinner in the backyard, stay until the end. I asked, are you going to start dating again? I laughed, probably harder than I needed to. Sweetheart, I'm just trying to remember what a full night's sleep feels like. She smiled. You know, you're allowed to be happy again. Stay until the end. You're not just somebody's husband or somebody's dad. You're still you. That hit me harder than I expected, because for years I had built my world around roles. Husband, father, provider. But in the absence of one and the evolution of another, stay until the end, I was rediscovering the man underneath. Not bitter, not broken, just rebuilding. One afternoon, while clearing out old boxes in the attic, I came across a photo of Carolyn and me on our honeymoon, smiling, holding hands on a beach in South Carolina. Stay until the end, I stared at it for a while, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Eventually, I just put it in a box labeled past and slid it under the bed, because that's what it was, the past. Not a wound, not a trophy, just a closed chapter. Stay until the end. I've started volunteering at a local community center, helping veterans with logistics and employment support. Turns out decades of coordinating freight transfers teaches you how to organize just about anything. And it feels good, really good, to help people who appreciate it. The biggest shift, though, is internal. I used to think dignity meant staying silent, keeping the peace, absorbing damage without complaint. Now I know better. Dignity means standing up. Not with your fists, but with your facts. It means knowing your value so well no one else gets to define it for you. and it means protecting your future, even when it means walking away from what once felt safe. I didn't win anything in that divorce, but I reclaimed something: my name, my voice, my peace. 6 months had passed since that unforgettable dinner. Life didn't just change, it settled. Quietly, without drama. The storm had passed. Stay until the end, and in its place was a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. Carolyn. I were officially divorced. The paperwork was finalized 2 months after the dinner, and there had been no further contact outside of what was necessary through the attorneys. Stay until the end. She didn't fight it. Once she realized the postnup held up in court, and that the trust transfers were airtight, she simply signed and walked away. She moved into a rental condo about 20 minutes away. From what I'd heard through mutual acquaintances, stay till the end. She tried reconnecting with a few old friends, but most of them weren't interested in rebuilding burned bridges. Chad had vanished. Apparently, he cut ties with her the week after the dinner and transferred to a different gym. Word was, stay until the end. He started dating someone closer to his age, or at least someone who wasn't still legally married when they met. As for me, I stayed in the house, not because I needed the space or the memories, but because it was still home, for Emily and for myself. Stay until the end. The mortgage had long been paid off, and everything was in my name, or rather, in trust for my daughter. There was something comforting about knowing that the roof over my head couldn't be used as leverage or taken away by someone else's decisions. Stay until the end. Emily came back to visit in late October, just before heading off for her graduate program in Oregon. We spent that weekend cooking, cleaning out the last of Carolyn's old things, and watching football in the den. On her final night before the flight, she handed me a letter she'd written by hand. Something she said she'd been meaning to give me since graduation. In it, she thanked me for the way I handled everything. For not lashing out. Stay until the end. For protecting her without turning the experience into a battleground. She wrote, "You showed me what strength really looks like. It's not yelling. It's not revenge. Stay until the end. It's standing tall when everything around you falls apart, and walking out with your head high." I kept that letter in my desk drawer. Still do. Around the neighborhood, people started noticing a change in me. Stay until the end. Not because I was doing anything flashy, but because I wasn't carrying the weight anymore. I went back to fishing on Sunday mornings. I rejoined the bowling league I dropped out of years ago. Stay until the end. I even started doing weekend volunteer shifts at the local Veterans Resource Center, just helping folks organize reassigned, practice interviews, and navigate job apps. Nothing fancy. But it felt good to contribute again. Stay until the end. There was one awkward moment at the grocery store in early December. I was standing in the produce section when I spotted Carolyn across the aisle. She was with a friend I didn't recognize. Stay until the end. Holding a basket of organic snacks and glancing nervously toward me, I gave a polite nod and returned to selecting apples. No need for confrontation. No bitterness left. She didn't approach me and I didn't approach her. Stay, that unspoken space between us said everything. Later that month, I received a Christmas card in the mail with no return address. Inside was a short note. I wish I had done things differently. You didn't deserve that. Stay until the end. I hope you're okay. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a name to know who it came from. I didn't respond. Some doors, once closed, are meant to stay that way. By January, I had rearranged my entire home office into a small woodworking space. The step into something I'd always wanted to do but never had time, or emotional room, to pursue. I started crafting small pieces as picture frames, birdhouses, even a jewelry box for Emily's birthday. Stay, at the end, working with my hands brought me a calm I hadn't felt since I was a teenager helping my dad in his shed. It was something no one could take away, no matter how chaotic life became. I didn't miss Carolyn. I missed who I thought she was. The woman I married. The woman I believed in. But those memories were like old photographs, still silent, and best left in the album. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. Stay until the end. It was about restoring my own sense of self. About reclaiming the space I had once surrendered for the sake of peace. And understanding, finally, that real peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from truth. The truth is I was never the boring one. Who stayed. Who worked. Who paid attention. Who saw the storm coming and quietly reinforced the walls. And when it hit, I didn't break. I endured. 6 months later, say until the end, I was fixing the back fence on a quiet Saturday when Emily walked out holding 2 cold root beers. "How's the project coming along?" she asked with a smile. "Slow," I chuckled. "Stay until the end." But steady, we sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows over a yard that finally felt like ours. Calm, quiet, real. Emily leaned back, took a sip, then said, "Mom called again." I raised an eyebrow. Stay until the end. She wanted to know if she could come for Christmas. I drove another nail into the fence post before answering. "And what'd you tell her?" "I told her she made her choice," she said. matter-of-factly. I smiled. That's my goal. She nodded. By the way, Rebecca at the gym says Chad left her. For someone younger. I blinked, then laughed harder than I had in months. Not because I wanted revenge, but because it confirmed what I already knew. So the grass wasn't greener. It was just astroturf. Sometimes the greatest strength is found not in what you say, but in what you don't let destroy you. Betrayal hurts, but it also reveals. It shows you who truly stands beside you when the smoke clears. Stay until the end. So to anyone out there healing from heartbreak, I'll say this: protect your peace, prepare your future, and never let someone else's chaos pull you off your path. Tell me in the comments. Stay until the end. Have you ever had to quietly rebuild your life after someone tried to tear it down? I'd love to hear your story. Subscribe for more true stories of dignity, redemption, and the quiet power of doing what's right, even when nobody's watching.